At some point, you have to go from learning AI and the productivity hacks to how do we build AI into our products. I do think it's useful as an AI PM to be technical. If you're not able to say, hey, like we're doing one-shot reasoning, we need to do multiple shot. If you don't know what that is, or if we need to be able to deploy this model on device in a lightweight form for our enterprise partners to use, if you don't know what the implication of that is, you're going to be lacking in these discussions. What is your monopoly of one? Like, as Aakash Gupta, my set of experiences, what can I write about that kind of nobody else can write about? Because that's what the internet really rewards. And what it does is it increases your surface area for serendipity and luck.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Product Development Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Wakeling, and in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Aakash Gupta of the Product Growth Newsletter and Product Growth Podcast. Aakash is well known in the product sphere and has over 140,000 newsletter subscribers, of which he's providing 2 deep dives every week to them. He was previously the VP of Product at Apollo.io, the Head of Product Growth at Affirm, and Lead Product Manager at Epic Games, where he led data-driven growth for Fortnite during some of its best performing years. In this episode, we're going to cover his 7 steps to become an AI product manager, providing some insights across what you need to learn, how to upskill, how to network, how to get interviews, how to nail the interviews, and ultimately how to succeed in AI product management. Just to note that this is the season finale of the Product Development Podcast, and in the next season, we'll be changing the direction slightly. We'll still be covering product development, but there'll be something a little bit different in the new format, so make sure to stay tuned and all will be revealed in due course. So make sure to follow on your preferred podcast platforms, as well as subscribe on YouTube if you're watching. But without further ado, here's the episode with Aakash. You've grown product growth so much in the last couple of years, it's exploded. So I'd love to hear a bit of that journey before we dive into the main topic of the podcast today.
Yeah, so I was really lucky, I think. I basically, my whole life, my set of experiences helped bring me to this moment where I completed an English major basically in college. I used to be a debater in high school. I used to program and code and build apps before that. Then I spent 15 years as a product manager. So about 3 years ago, at the onset of COVID, when we were all set at home in 2021, what I realized was I used to spend probably 50% of my day networking with people at my company. That's like what PMs need to do. And especially in gaming, where you don't own an engineering team, like your traditional company, you have like your 6 engineers who just rely on you. You actually influence like the 1,000-person Fortnite team. I used to have to just spend all my time like with the director of Fortnite, with the CEO, trying to influence them. And all of a sudden I had this free time that I was using to like write documents and stuff. And when I was posting them on the internal Slack in COVID era, like nobody was super interested in them versus how they were in person. And so I posted one of those articles, Shopify or Roblox as the Shopify of gaming, in LinkedIn. And whoa, my eyes opened up, like 10,000 impressions, 100 likes, people visiting my website for the first time in 10 years. I was like, whoa, this was like an aha moment for me, plus a dopamine rush. So I started posting more on LinkedIn, and that got me interested in writing. And so then I took this course called Rite of Passage by David Perel, $4,000 course. My entire attitude towards that was, oh, this is so much money. If I think about it too much, I'm not going to do it. So I just fired on it. Like, just go.
It sounds like it's been a good
Just
ROI
take
already.
the
So
course. Yeah, just take the course. And, the course, the very first thing he does is, so after I paid for the course, I read people's reviews about the course after. And what I realized is like on day 1, he asks you to create a newsletter and start emailing people. And he tells you like, get 20 people signed up on your list. And I was like, about a month before the course itself, I was like, okay, let me create my newsletter now. Let me start getting some momentum. So I entered the course with probably like 500-600 subscribers, which was more than most people. And that led me to like really just be able to seep everything out of the course as possible. And one of the main lessons in the course is, what is your monopoly of one? Like, as Aakash Gupta, my set of experiences, what can I write about that kind of nobody else can write about? Because that's what the internet really rewards. And what it does is it increases your surface area for serendipity and luck if you write about kind of this thing that only you're the expert in. And so I saw a lot of influencers talking about B2B product growth and B2C product growth, but I never saw somebody talking about both. So I realized this is my niche is like, your Lenny's and Elena's. Lenny's on the B2C side, Lena's on the B2B side. Who can do both, right? And so that was where I figured out, okay, this is my niche, my area, and I started zoning in on that type of content. And it was interesting. Originally, I didn't want to write that much about product management,
Mm,
especially because I was a product manager. I didn't want the people who were working with me to be like, "Hey, you just recommended that product managers do X, but you don't even have time to do X in your job," or "You're writing about product management, but you didn't do this task that I wanted." But the market demanded that content. They
mm.
demanded product management content. They demanded career content, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so the market kind of pulled me in the direction of the content I'm in now. It also pulled me to write a paid newsletter. What I found is that people really wanted deep dives. And I couldn't afford to just give these away for free. So I created a paid newsletter. And that paid newsletter ultimately was growing to a point where the amount I was making from the paid newsletter was more than I could ever make as a VP of product. So I made the shift about 11 months ago now at the turn of the year to switch from VP of product, which I thought was like my dream job for the last 15 years, to creator. And then in the last 6 months, I launched a podcast as well. So that's been kind of the high level journey for me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the dream position for many PMs and other people out there to go to that full time content creation place. But I mean, we spoke in the prequel to this, and you're telling me how long you spend on each newsletter itself, and it's a full time job. This isn't something you can, throw out in a couple of hours on a Monday morning and then go and chill until Friday. It's a lot of work as well. Probably people underestimate.
I think so. And so what I've had to do actually is like because of launching the podcast, I've had to hire a team as well
Mm,
to help me. Like as you know, we were just talking about like podcast editing takes enormous amount of time. Podcast research before the guest comes on takes enormous amount of time. Clipping the podcast, creating shorts. So I hired a team to really help me do that because I need to keep that focus on the newsletter. And then I realized it still wasn't enough. So I also had to hire people to help me with the newsletter. So for the longest time, I didn't have an editor. Now I have an editor. For the longest time, I didn't have anybody helping me with the graphics. Now I have that too.
in terms of the main topic of today, then, I read a newsletter that you published, I think it was September this year, which was the 7 steps to become an AI PM. It's pretty self explanatory for the most part, and you lay out really nicely in an infographic. But I think there's probably a few nuances and ideas which we can kind of, unpack a bit today. The very first one, shape your content diet. Do you want to maybe, summarize that, and, why is that step one, and what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, so I think that probably a lot of people listening, this isn't a new idea, but for me, when I first heard this idea 2 years ago, I think Sahil Bloom was like the originator of this idea. It was pretty game changing for me, right? So, what you put into your brain, it turns out, is what you end up like a year later. It's kind of like, the calories you ate for the last year, they determine your body composition. The content that you ate for the last year determines how you think, what you think about, the quality
Right.
of your thinking. And this was an unlock for me because to be honest, I was consuming a lot of content around Fortnite. I was consuming a lot of content around the NBA, a lot of content around the NFL, a lot of content around rap music. And I probably still do some of that, but I realized I need to shape my content diet more around my work, around things that matter, that are useful, less Game of Thrones, more product management. It sounds cheesy, and people who like product management is taking over their lives, they may not want to do
Mm,
that. But I think AI is a particularly interesting one because AI is not just changing product management, it's changing absolutely everything. And I think you can find content that is as engaging as that Fortnite or that NFL or that NBA content out there that'll shape what you learn so that you're just so much more effective. And so for me, the way I think about it and what I've looked at across sort of the content modalities is that YouTube and video have a huge impact on people. You tend to retain more if you're kind of like fully engrossed in watching and listening to something. So I often recommend people start with YouTube. There's this fellow named Jeff Su. He's a product marketing manager at Google. He has some amazing stuff on like his guide to perplexity. Like you'd be surprised, like if you're in the Twitter sphere, you would think everybody's using perplexity. Now go ask 10 of your friends. If you don't live in San Francisco, I'm guarantee you 8 of them will say, nah, I don't use it regularly. I still use Google. But Perplexity is a game changer for your productivity. So checking out his content to understand that, for instance. Or Dwarkesh Patel, this man, he has like one podcast every 2 weeks. And I swear to God, he's spending like 60 hours a week in those 2 weeks preparing for that episode. He'll have an episode with the founder of OpenAI where he's talking about research papers that the man wrote 10 years ago and stuff like that. So he goes crazy deep on AI with the most important people, Jan LeCun at Facebook, all of the amazing people, Ilya Sutskever now. So then there's this guy named Matt Wolf, who's actually my friend over at Twitter. We used to both write viral Twitter AI news threads at some point. I didn't realize this man actually created a business over on YouTube, creating videos about these AI news, but his videos are legit. And what he also has added in are these super cool tutorials. So many of you guys might have been seeing about, hey, these people creating billion-dollar companies as one person. Well, how do you do that? How do you use Cursor? How do you use these different tools? He's got tutorials for all of that. So I love YouTube, and I think that instead of spending time watching TV shows, guys, after work, if you watch these videos, you're going to have a huge impact on your life a year down the line. Then there's newsletters. I'm a huge fan of newsletters. Obviously, I spend most of my time writing a newsletter, but the newsletters that I find are like really, 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 really good. So there's this one by Deep Learning AI, which is Andrew NG. I don't know his name pronunciation, Andrew Nig or something like that.
I think it's
But
NG. I think. Yeah.
yeah, he's been like at the forefront of teaching AI to people in his newsletter. There's no fluff. There's no BS. And then there's Stratechery. Like this is the old classic. It's a paid newsletter. Most people don't realize. But he puts AI into context. What is Microsoft doing? What is Meta doing? What is Amazon, Nvidia doing? He is the one who I think has the best perspective on what big tech is doing in AI. And then you get to Twitter. So Twitter, if you think about AI news, it is the center. And every AI researcher, all of OpenAI, Anthropic's researchers, Character AI's researchers, they're posting on Twitter. So you have to go there. You have to follow people like SV Pino, who teaches AI, Min Choi, who covers all of the key news. It's Paul AI, who does a lot of tutorials. Rowan Chung, who does the AI news threads, which we used to actually be competitors. So we would see like, I used to post a daily AI news thread. He used to post one. We used to just get like 3 million impressions. I backed out of that game, let him win. And then Levels IO, who is like building products with AI. I think he does like 600,000, I think roughly in monthly revenue on his AI products, and he builds in public on those. And then finally, everybody here is on LinkedIn, most likely. So Zane Khan, Ali Miller, Ruben Hassid. I think if you follow these people and your content diet starts to become AI, you'll learn so much. You'll be able to transition into AI PM.
A couple of things come to mind when you're listing all those names. And by the way, I'll try and put links down to as many of the things we mention as possible in this podcast. But yeah, the first point is, so there's a very big difference between AI for productivity hacks for product managers and building AI products. I think a lot of PMs, it's pretty much essential now to leverage AI for product management, but it's a very different thing. And what we're talking about today really is becoming an AI product manager and understanding how to build and integrate AI into your products, not just for productivity gains, but it could be productivity gains, but also a lot of front-facing, customer-facing experiences with AI as well. So just to kind of make that clear early on. But the other thing on the curated diet, I think, the more content you consume in this area, the algorithms are going to start working in your favor as well, because they'll start recommending content because they can see you're consuming more of this. So suddenly, you'll get new discoveries from YouTube or LinkedIn for things that you haven't seen before or people you haven't encountered. So curating your content diet isn't just a proactive thing, but eventually it will become a reactive thing. Kind of a nice segue into the second part then, the taking relevant courses. You mentioned Andrew NG, and actually my partner, who's a developer, did the introduction, I think the AI for Everyone course, which I think you've got mentioned on the infographic. So she said it was really great and definitely a really good entrance point into understanding AI space.
She's more authoritative than me, so listen to her, right? That's what I heard though from a lot of different people because I've been coaching a lot of people who want to become AI PMs. So they've been taking the variety of courses. So I've been getting feedback on the courses they don't like, they do like. Anything from Andrew NG, like I think that those are the courses people tend to like a lot. Then there's this one, Elements of AI by the University of Helsinki. I think it's like surprisingly fun, which is nice. They made it free. There's this machine learning crash course by Google. I think like if you get those, you have AI 101, but you don't need to necessarily do all three. Even just one of them will help you a lot. And then Coursera has an AI product management specialization. To your point, like at some point you have to go from learning AI and the productivity hacks to how do we build AI into our products? And they're not exactly the same. You do need to have an understanding of the first to get to the second, though. So that's why there's some content there on the productivity. And then let's dive into how it works building products, right? And then Andre Carpathy. So this man is amazing. Like I just think his YouTube channel, go subscribe to it. He helped, I think he was a founding member of OpenAI, if not founding early and had a gigantic impact. He'll help you create GPT-2 all by yourself. Like literally he'll give you 0 to 1 everything you need to do. So you'll learn the data sets they used, how they trained it, everything. You'll be able to create the interface. He has a YouTube series. I think it's like 30 hours, 10 videos, 3-hour videos each. And after that, you'll be able to create GPT-2. Like it's pretty mind-blowing stuff. So he'll give you those first principle understandings. And then I think to go to the extra mile, I do think it's useful as an AI PM to be technical. And so a lot of people are going to be like hesitant, like, oh my gosh, I don't have a coding degree. Like I don't have a programming background like you, Aakash. Like, are you sure? And I say yes. I tell a lot of people this is like, as quickly as possible, get to these 3 courses I'm talking about now and take at least one of them. So CS50, this is Harvard, by the way, the famous Harvard course. So they have Introduction to Artificial Intelligence with Python. Python is very readable, guys. It's not hard to read. So if you can read English, you can read Python code. Like it's that readable and you'll be able to learn and pick it up. And with a tool like Claude 3.5 Sonnet on your side, it'll be able to answer any questions you have along the way while you're taking said course. Then there's the deep learning specialization by deeplearning.ai and the natural language processing specialization by deep learning AI. And I think if you take even just one course from each of these sections that we talk about, you'll be ahead of like 80% of people.
I think I might be ripping off a recent LinkedIn post that you did here, but I think certifications and courses are great for learning and expanding your skill sets. But what they're not doing is they're not this panacea for getting a job and having all those listed on your LinkedIn profile. It's the real world experience, right? That's going to really land the jobs later on. So, yeah, this is really great for actually on the job, being able to, build stuff, prove your worth, make sure you're doing the right things at the right time for the right people. But yeah, it's not going to, yeah, just magically create jobs for you.
No, yeah, don't even bother posting these, honestly, on your resume or LinkedIn. You're doing this for you. This is step 2 of 7, guys. Like, this isn't going to differentiate you. In fact, if you think about it, most of your competition for these AI PM jobs, they're like AI developers who have taken more advanced courses than this. So if you start bringing up courses, you're going to look bad. They might have a master's in AI or they might have a PhD in AI.
Right.
And so bringing up these courses, this is just you trying to get to the technical level that a PM needs to get to.
So what do you think that technical level is? Is it just to be able to speak the same language as the developers? And when we're talking about concepts, you understand the system design, you understand when they describe the LLM in a certain way, you're kind of following along. Maybe the nuances you'd need explanation on, but what is that level to you?
I think it needs to be higher. So here's the thing, right? Your average PM, you're working with like developers and engineers. Your average AI PM, you're working with AI researchers, AI research teams. Even your designer, typically your AI designer is pretty technically fluent in what's going on with the AI. And so you don't want to be the dumbest person in the room, right? You want to be able to hold gravitas in this discussion. Let's say,
Mhm.
you're the PM on GPT-5, okay? So the research team is saying GPT-5 is good to release to the public, but you don't think so. you're not going to be able to convince them if you can't get to the technical levels, the technical details, you know? If you're not able to say, hey, like, we're doing one shot reasoning, we need to do multiple shot. If you don't know what that is, or if we need to be able to deploy this model on device in a lightweight form for our enterprise partners to use, if you don't know what the implication of that is, you know, you're going to be lacking in these discussions. And so, if those two things I just said didn't make a lot of sense to you, like you need to not only those make a lot of sense to you, but actually you need to be like beyond that thinking. So I would say that for an AI PM, it's really, really important to actually have built some AI products yourself. And these
Mm.
courses, as the homework assignments, they'll have you do that. Andre will help you build GPT-2. So you don't need to be able to build GPT-5, but you probably should be able to build GPT-2. And as we'll talk about later, it's also important to figure out like how you monetize these things, how you think about go to market. If you really want to hold gravitas, let's say you want to be a PM at OpenAI. A lot of people I talk to want to do that because you know what? TC at OpenAI right now is like 1.2, 1.3 million per year. So a lot of people want that high TC. But if you really want to be a PM at OpenAI, you want to hold your water with Sam Altman or somebody in these conversations, you need to go above and beyond.
Yeah, so it's a nice segue into the step 3 then, the gain hands-on experience. So yeah, what does that hands-on experience look like to you? You know, how deep do you need to go? You mentioned probably do some homework assignments as part of these courses. Is number 2 and 3 kind of, you know, joined up at that case, or is there an extra step?
There is an extra step. So here's the thing, right? Let's say you get into the OpenAI PM interview loop. Awesome, right? But who are you competing against? You're competing against the Microsoft, Google, Amazon PMs who have been working on AI for the last few years. That's your competition. That's who wants to work at OpenAI. Maybe even, you know, the character AI PM who character AI currently has this turmoil, so they're thinking about switching over to OpenAI. Like that's your competition typically in these interviews. So if that's the case, then they have worked on building AI products as a PM. Some homework assignments are not going to be enough. So you actually do need to build an AI product. But here's the good news. With AI, you can build an AI product easily. So you should get Cursor. I think it's like the best right now. Although if you prefer, you can use ChatGPT Canvas, or you can just use what Claude 3.5 Sonnet has built in. But I recommend Cursor still. I still think it's the best, is the easiest. So what Cursor will enable you to do is in programming, we have this common convention. We'll use // and we'll put a note at the top of any function or code block that we create. You know what Cursor will do? It'll create the code underneath it after you create that note. And then you can use Claude 3.5 Sonnet to debug. You will have issues. And you will not have learned, you know, all the algorithmic design patterns that a programmer would have learned. You will not have learned, you know, the difference between a test and a production environment, how to deploy. But guess what? The AI, you can just ask these
Mm.
questions, and there's no better way to learn than by doing. And then I think don't release it for free, guys. A lot of people I know, they just want to release like a free product and say they got 100 users and that's it. No, release you know, a freemium version or a free trial to get people to try to use it, but then also have a paid version and literally try to get to like $100 MRR
Mm.
with your AI product is what I would recommend. And here's the thing, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't bother trying to create the hippest, newest, most innovative AI product like you would as a PM. For this project, just choose any of the existing AI product markets that are out there. There are so many of them. You know, talk to PDF. There's like hundreds of millions of MRR right now in the talk to PDF market. Create a talk to PDF tool and just literally go figure out which one you like the best and start to burn down its feature set. First, create the most important feature, slap a price on it, and charge 10% what that product is charging, so you get some paying users, and then just build on top of that. So I think that the people who have gotten into these AI companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, like these top of the line companies, also a lot of people want to work for Microsoft because they basically own parts of OpenAI. The people who have gotten into those companies, they all did this.
It's funny actually because I guess some people might get to this point and then think, you know what, I can just found my own company. Why do I want to become an AI PM for another company? But I guess the dichotomy is at this step. Yeah. So the next one then, structure your portfolio. So yeah, what does the portfolio look like at this point? You dived in, you've tried to make a product. Maybe you've also potentially monetized it. You know, what's next?
Yeah. So the first thing to do is you need to take some of your current PM experience and talk about like how you have created AI or ML features. That's really important. And if you haven't done that, you also need to do that. So maybe I should have created that as a separate step here. And then you need to have your side project, which you've created and you've gotten revenue for. So those are the two most important elements of your portfolio. And the thing is, like your resume, like everybody's resume looks the same these days. I launched these AI features, I created this AI side project. So nobody can really differentiate. The portfolio comes in to help you differentiate. It helps people understand, okay, this guy has used Cursor. This guy has learned Andre Karpathy's course in order to build this product. And then this guy has thought deeply about the user problems. This guy has tried different APIs. He tried the OpenAI API. He realized that was too expensive. So he moved over to the Anthropic API. Like all of these things, if you can include kind of the story of how you did things and also show that you do it thoughtfully as a PM, because there's a lot of builders who don't approach these things very thoughtfully. They're not prioritizing the right work. If you can kind of specifically double click on that point,
Mm.
the resume kind of does a lot of the selling for you. And what I've seen is that normally your resume is your marketing document that gets people your foot in the door. But right before your interview, people will open up your portfolio, which is linked on the top of your resume, and they'll be like, oh, wow. And they'll start learning more. And I find a lot of people I talk to, they're like, yeah, my interview was just about my portfolio. He was just asking follow-up question after follow-up question after follow-up question about my products. So it creates this canvas and aperture for your interview, which is in a part of the world that you want to talk about and are prepared and ready to talk about, which is a huge advantage than getting some left field question about Midjourney and you haven't even studied Midjourney yet. If you can just focus it in on the areas you are an expert in.
Yeah, I think back to your earlier point as well about, yeah, if it's a homework project as part of a course you took and using that as your portfolio, it's a very different statement you're making compared to you've gone off and done some proactive building a new product yourself and founded that and putting that to market. It's a very different story you're telling at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Everyone's done the whole course homework, unfortunately. So this is all about differentiation and actually getting the job.
I think moving on to the networks, I think this is particularly one which I think is a really good thing to pick your brains on pretty deeply based in your experience and how you've grown product growth over the last few years. So here you've got communities and social media, virtual and real events, build connections, create content. You've got a lot of things mentioned on the infographic. So what are you thinking about for network? What's really significant to really focus on in this journey?
So you've created a product that you're charging for. So you need to market that product. And to market that product, you need to create content because otherwise you're going to be paying for marketing and we don't have the money for that, right? So we want to focus on organic growth for our product. That's going to happen through content. Everybody in the AI world is on Twitter. So they're going to notice you. This is actually going to create your interviews as you're marketing your product. You would be surprised how many people end up with like a short process, like a 4 interview process at OpenAI instead of their longer 7, 8 interview process because OpenAI saw you on Twitter. They saw you were a really good builder and then they reached out to you. So unlike your average PM where the advice I give is actually don't create content, like content isn't the best thing for you. Usually people think it's like a distraction that you're like more focused on content than
Right,
product
right.
management. How do you even have time for content? AI is the exception where create content, create contributions to open source AI things, engage in the community. You're an indie builder now. Go comment on every indie builder's thread post announcing their product hunt and say, great, I voted for you on product hunt. Start to build those connections. Eventually that indie builder will get acqui-hired into Anthropic and he'll say, oh yeah, my buddy Adam, he's a cracked coder too. We should bring him along too, right? That's kind of like the discourse that I've seen time and time again, is how people are actually breaking into the top companies and then go to these events, like especially if you're in London, like or in SF or in Berlin or in Bangalore, there are AI hackathons happening. These companies are putting these on. Now, if you're where I am in Durham, North Carolina, you need to kind of make the decision like, am I going to go fly to NYC or SF? And I personally would say still do it and treat it as half vacation, half work. But yeah, do it. Go to these events. Today, as we're talking, Lenny's Summit is happening in San Francisco. See if you can make it out there. Participate and don't just be like a lurker. Reach out, see if you can become a speaker, talk about your story as a builder. All of these things will position you in the AI space so that people start coming to you. So your LinkedIn will be a honeypot, your Twitter will be a honeypot, your GitHub will be a thing. And then if you're doing these conferences, all these things will be a thing. And then as the final step, traditional networking that we do for a job search, reach out to people at these top target companies. Maybe they went to your university, they went to your MBA program. Maybe you met them at a hackathon. Maybe they're connected to Adam and you're connected to Adam. So ask Adam to give you a warm intro, or maybe they're going at the same conference as you. So you tell them, hey, let's meet up at this conference. And then you use that person to get a referral and ask them to ping the hiring manager. So if they work at Anthropic, ask them to ping the hiring manager of Anthropic's open PM position, not just drop a referral in the ATS, but ping them, and that'll get you the interview.
So it's very much not what probably a lot of product managers do, which is maybe they lost their job and the next 2-3 months is just spamming applications to all these different positions, thinking that if I send 100, 10 are going to maybe get through the interview round, and maybe just a game of attrition and numbers. Really, the time is probably better spent taking the time to build your own brand, tell your story, create those connections, create the network, and those network effects will put the building blocks in place to find something potentially that's going to bring you to that next position.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? The AI space loves startups and loves founders, unlike your average PM space. And so you lost your job. The thing you should do, the day you lose your job, you should make a LinkedIn post. The second day after that is you should just pick yourself up and create this company that I'm talking about. Get into Cursor, pick one of the red ocean markets in the AI space. Another really good one, even though we just heard the horror story out of Character AI, is, your AI girlfriend or your AI boyfriend, whatever it is, whatever you want to create that. You can copy levels.io. You can create interior AI, whatever you want to do. You can create photo headshot AI, whatever you want to do, create that and just get started. And guess what? The fact that you started a company, they're actually going to think that's even better that you started an AI company. So you suddenly turned losing your job into an even better opportunity.
I mean, from your own experience about building, your brands, the product growth brand, and how you've leveraged network connections, what other tips can you provide people in terms of opening up some doors, maybe trying to, reach up the influencer sphere and open certain gates that you maybe couldn't have opened, 3-4 years ago?
I mean, the biggest one, and this is what people on my team are always mind blown about, is everybody responds to my cold messages. Because they get a cold message from me, they click my name, and they're like, oh, wow, this dude has 226,000 followers on LinkedIn. This dude has 118,000 followers on Twitter. I might as well just at least reply to him, even if the answer is a no or whatever, but it almost never is a no. Then I can just keep the connection warm with this guy. Now I've had a connection with somebody who has some impact. So as soon as you become a builder, as soon as you create a brand, your cold message response rate skyrockets. Like your average cold message response rate, maybe like what, 10%? Mine is probably like 98, 99%.
So there's that grind first step, which is just push content out there, but provide value as well, because no one's going to follow you if you're just providing rubbish content that's just obviously either completely generated by ChatGPT or whatever else, and offer value to the market, and you hopefully should get that value back into a follow account.
Yes. Please don't use ChatGPT for your content. If you want to use ChatGPT for your content, here's what you do. You create the first 20% of the content yourself, which is like the key points and the outline. Then you say, ChatGPT, turn this into a post. That gets it to 80%. And then you edit out all of the parts that seem AI.
Yeah, things like this podcast, you can do an hour conversation and then you can upload that. You can use something like opus.pro to create all the shorts, which you can have a load of short form content. You can put the transcripts into ChatGPT and say, generate a few blog posts on the different topics we covered. But all the conversation, the core content is produced by you. And I think that's the key thing for sure. More so now, I've got my ChatGPT radar engaged these days, and I can see very quickly if something is AI generated. It's even comments on LinkedIn, you can tell very quickly if it's a real person or just Yeah, the bot. So yeah.
Yeah, don't use AI comments on LinkedIn. It's the worst. Usually they just re-summarize the message. They don't
Mm,
add any value. What you should think about is your comment isn't for the person who you're commenting the post on. It's for who everybody's going to see it. So
right.
what you want to do is you want to extend the post. So I just had the 7 steps of AIPM. Why don't you add in step 6.5, do X, step 1.5, do X. Like this post went super viral on LinkedIn. I think it got like 1 million impressions. So each comment probably got like 40, 50,000 impressions. So that's going to be more than your average LinkedIn post for you being a smaller creator. So use those comments strategically.
Mm. Yeah, and another thing I heard the other day, which I think is quite a good tactic. I don't know if it resonates with you, but use short form content, so YouTube Shorts, or a quick post on LinkedIn or a quick tweet, um, to gain followers, like your core vanity numbers, if you want to put it that way. Then you create the medium form content, maybe a 10-minute video on YouTube, or a more substantial LinkedIn post, maybe a thread on Twitter, with a few different sort of responses, and use that to build up a more engaged follower base who are actually going to come back and retain a bit more. And then you have your kind of loyal followers at the top end, which is harder to get, but that's where the long form content really comes in. It's the paid newsletters, which are, and obviously you can speak to this, but many thousands of words in a single post, or the 45-minute, hour, 2-hour podcast. And the people who engage with that for enough time, they're ripe for monetization. Is that fair? Would you agree with that?
Yes, but in the strategy we're talking about, I'm giving you a lot to do. I would say just focus on building your company, focus on getting users to your product. Don't focus on thought leadership
Mm,
content about
mm,
AI or product management. That's a waste of time. First of all, people, again, don't look positively on this type of content. It's a universal. It's all over the globe. Some people say, "Oh no, in America they must be okay." No, 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 no. If you go look at PM content creators, many of them have had a layoff or something like that in their career story because the boss is like, "Your LinkedIn is on fleek, but that thing that I asked you to do is taking you a day. You could have used your time on LinkedIn to create that." So, and a lot of the people listening are going to have a job at the same time. So, marketing the side project already is kind of pissing off your company. Don't do more with PM content and AI content. It's a total waste of your time unless you want to become like Adam Ryan, create a PM content business of some
mhm.
sort. That's a different story. But right now, we're talking about becoming an AI PM. And so for that, it's just focused on your AI product. And I highly, highly, highly recommend, one, do not use your company computer. Two, make sure that all of your social media posts are off hour. What is the best time to do this? Like literally like 8 p.m. and later and on the weekends.
Yes, it's a fine balance between providing a lot of value to the market and also just looking like you don't work and do nothing in your day job.
Yes.
um, cool. So yeah, moving on to the next step, which is snagging interviews. So a lot of what you provide in product growth is all about how to get interviews, how to nail the interviews. So to get the interview, we talked about networking, one component, but what else is involved?
The most important thing is the mindset shift you just talked about, which is like stop dropping your resume. Yes, dropping your resume might work if you're in a smaller market and you're targeting a company that isn't highly sought after. So if that's the case, go for it. But most people who have listened now 45 minutes into this podcast, they want to work at OpenAI, Anthropic, Character AI, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. So if you want to work there, the very first thing is you need to somebody to message the hiring manager or recruiter for a role, or you need them to reach out to you. Those are basically the two ways to get an interview because there are 1,000 people more qualified than you who have been, maybe they were PM at NVIDIA for the last 6 years who also want that job. So you're not going to stand out even if you created the best resume, the best cover letter, the best portfolio. Your $400 MRR product is not going to stand up to their $1 billion MRR product over at an NVIDIA, right? It's just a different level of experience and scale and opportunity. So what you want to do is you want to create like a super targeted list. Like these are like the 10 companies I want to work at. The very first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I get connections into these companies. The great thing is all these people are on Twitter. Reply to their tweets. So if you reply to their tweets once a week for 12 weeks, they will know who you are. Hit them with a DM after that. Hey, we've been interacting on Twitter. I'm an AI builder. You're an AI builder. I want to work at OpenAI. Can I buy you coffee? We're both going to be at Lenny's event. Can we meet up there? We're both going to be at this AI conference. Can we meet up there? Right? You use that to build the connection with them. And in the connection with them, they themselves will often bring up, like, yo, you might like it here at Anthropic. You might like it here at OpenAI. You know what? I would. And in fact, like, I want to do that. Like, do you know the hiring manager for this open role? Would you be willing to ping them on my behalf? That's ultimately how you're going to get these interviews, or they see you. And in fact, all of those companies I mentioned are doing a ton of outbound where they find an AI builder and they message them themselves. So in the course of marketing your product, they will also reach out to you.
I think some people, may struggle with some of that networking element in terms of, maybe they feel not so confident in that networking skill. Maybe they're a little bit more introverted potentially. Is that something just people have to get over and they have to learn how to really properly network, how to speak to people, how to communicate well? I mean, I guess you kind of hope that as a PM, they should be reasonably competent at certain aspects of those anyway. But yeah, I mean, any advice for people who maybe struggle doing that sort of, yeah, outgoing approach to that networking?
So I mean, that's actually a lot of my paid subscribers is those people. That's why they subscribe to the 10,000 word deep dives, because I put all the templates in there. I put the exact message you can use. I put the exact conversation starter you can have. So paid content that will help you along the way is going to be helpful. That's one thing. The second thing is what you just said, which is this is going to be an important skill set for you as an AI PM. So use the job searching as an opportunity to expand your range. If you're not comfortable with cold emails, use this as an opportunity to improve at them. If you're not comfortable with engaging on Twitter with people you don't know or people who you consider famous or you look up to, use this as an opportunity to grow into that. Because if you are going to be an AI PM and you're creating a competitor with Andrei Karpathy or Ilya Sutskever, wouldn't it be amazing if you could also go talk to them and have them as an ally for you potentially or a partner? So it's actually going to help you as an AI PM down the line.
Mm. So once you get through those gates and you manage to get the interview, and maybe it's the technical interview, maybe it's the product sense interview, maybe it's the meeting the hiring manager. You've done a lot of content around nailing interviews and helping enable product managers to get through these stages. So I assume a lot of the generic advice you give PMs is probably still applicable here. Are there any nuances to the AI interview that is worth mentioning?
Yeah, for sure. So with my co-author on this piece, Nancy, we actually asked 20 people who have recently gotten AI PM jobs about the interview types and questions that they were seeing. So they give us a bunch of data that we could use. And what we found is like the product case study is like really, really, really common. So in a lot of areas, like if you're not applying to big tech, you may not get a product case study like how should we grow our AI product footprint, or how should DocuSign build AI, or something like that. But for these roles, you're highly likely to get that. So you need to
Mm.
practice the whole case study skill set, which, let's be honest, doing a case study is pretty much nothing like doing a PM job. So you need to just treat this as a new and separate skill set that you learn, right? Typically when you get a question like this, you need to do like some clarification, you need to define the user, you need to do the business goals, then you need to go into some framework that you present where you methodically go through and find a user group and you find a problem for them, you justify that problem, then you go through some creative solutioning and you try to come up with solutions that none of the other interviews have come up with. Then you talk about the risks and the metrics. Like this just like it's like the entire PM job, what you do in a year, cramped into like 30 to 45 minutes. And I find that some of the best PMs in the world are horrible at these interviews. So learn your case study. That's number one. So then the second thing that we found a lot of people are asked is like, propose novel metrics that capture nuanced aspects of AI performance relative to the business. How are you going to answer this, right? So obviously your real world experience building your AI product is going to help, but also like specifically think about metrics. And this is a key area that they look for AI PMs. And then the final is like feature prioritization. So outline a series of A/B tests or user studies to validate how we should roll out GPT-5, how we should roll out Claude Sonnet 4.0. So you need to think about that and how you're going to drive those. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that most of these have homework. So there will be usually a homework element. The most common form of that is they say like spend 3 to 6 hours on this document, and then like in the final round they'll have you like present it. First thing is first, like that 3 to 6 hours is BS. If you're gonna do the homework, you're gonna spend like, I don't know, 12 to
Put the
24
hours in.
hours.
Yeah.
Create an amazing doc, and then before your presentation, literally run through it like 4 to 5 times. So now with ChatGPT voice mode or Gemini's within AI Studio, you can like literally give it like the 30, 45 minute presentation, and then you can ask it to like ask you hard questions or tell you about the parts in the presentation you did wrong. Like straight up just practice with AI on your presentation. Because yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who they did all of this hard work we just talked about, which probably what is like at least 1,000 hours of work, and then they lose on the homework phase because they spent the actual 3 to 6 hours they recommended on the homework.
It's going beyond expectations, isn't it? I think to stand out from those existing AI PMs from NVIDIA or whoever else, you have to really go the extra mile. And probably a lot of company values tend to, in some way, incorporate a desire to excel or that kind of thing. So I think proving that in the interview stages is really crucial beyond just proving you can do the core product tasks. And I think you can learn how to pass the interview. There are certain tricks, and you can play the game of the way interviews tend to be run. But when you get into the position, it's a very different story, and it's kind of a different skill set in some way. I think there's some great books like Cracking the PM Interview, and I think they did a follow up, which is once you're in the job, here's what you actually need to do. And I think they are two very distinct kind of areas of knowledge.
Yeah, like honestly, the best person I've ever done a mock with was never a PM. He was a senior at MIT, and for the last 4 years, he had been doing all these case study mocks with other MIT students. He was mind blowing at like identifying problems, coming up with creative solutions, and he'd never even been a PM before, so he just like practiced the heck out of it with other really smart people.
No, it's in terms of your kind of experience talking to PMs and in the community. What are some of the biggest mistakes do you think that PMs do in interviews? What's the big no nos? What's things that you need to watch out for in these interviews?
So the first thing is they don't nail their behavioral questions. So when you go into an interview, what I highly recommend is you have a bank of 6 stories and you have 3 points that you want to convey. So the average person, what they do is they get these behavioral questions and they treat them like a police cross-examination or a court cross-examination. They try to answer them as truthfully as possible. And I'm not saying lie, of course. What I'm saying is instead approach it like a salesperson. You have these 3 things you want to convey. I'm Adam, and I have built an AI product in business. I have done extra work on AI, and I am OpenAI's biggest fanboy. Okay, these are the 3 things you want to do. So when then they talk about what's your biggest weakness, you don't just say like, oh yeah, my biggest weakness is, when I was a PM at this production company for B2B, I didn't involve my designers the best. No, 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 no. The message we wanted to talk about was that you're an AI builder, right? So when I was building my AI product, I neglected marketing and go to market aspects of it. I created an amazing product, but I didn't think enough about how to get users for it. That's way better, right? Because then they're reminded of your key selling point. You're still giving like honest weakness. You're still reflecting honestly, but it's advancing your story like a salesperson. So behavioral questions show up even in your case interviews. So you just have to nail them. And then the second thing is I just find people are not concise. In this podcast, I haven't followed my own advice, but this isn't an interview. This is a podcast. So I have droned on for some of these answers for 4 or 5 minutes. You can't do that in an interview. I really think that people should never talk for more than 3 minutes. And the goal is 2 minutes. So you need to get in front of Zoom on your computer and record yourself and watch yourself. I would pay less attention like I haven't been using many ums or ahs, and you might think, oh, I need to be just like that. But I think that's all right. It's like less important on like how you come off that way. In fact, at these AI companies, they sometimes seem to prefer slightly socially awkward people, but don't bore them to death in your answers.
Mm.
So behavioral, concision, those are 1 and 2 problems. And then the third problem we already talked about a little bit, so I won't dwell on, which is just like not being prepared for interview as a skill.
I think a good practice, if you don't have a podcast or whatever else, you can just record a call, maybe a presentation you gave, or just a sync up call you have as a product manager with engineering, whatever else, and say, I'm recording this call. I'm just going to use it for my reference, and then watch it back, hear how you talk. Could you have said that in half the time? And I think for us, I know you have an editor now, but editing your own voice in a podcast is really fascinating. You learn so much about yourself in the process. And particularly in the early episodes I recorded, I think the questions, I would ask a question for like a minute and a half. And then I realized that actually I could just do the last 10 seconds and that was enough and provided all the context I needed. So I think particularly nerves and anxiety can help you just start talking nonsense, but it's absolutely a great activity to become self-reflective on, I think.
Yeah, and going even deeper on kind of like playing chess, not checkers, I recommend 1 interview a day. And I also recommend like not doing it during the workday if at all possible, and having like almost like 2 hours before. And like the routine that I like to do, adjust it for your own, what works for you, is like an hour of prep where I have like these 10 questions that I think they're going to ask me. And I literally record myself in the exact setting, them asking me, and I improve my answers, my how I'm seeming, how I'm looking. Then I spend the hour before the interview preparing myself mentally. So for me personally, like doing a workout, a shower, some meditation, that's what helps.
Mm.
And then I write down on a piece of paper, these are the 3 things I really want to show off in this interview. And I use that piece of paper as my notes to then answer things during the interview. So I keep seeing those 3 things. I keep getting this visual reminder. So choose some adaptation of that for you, but that's what works well for me.
Akash, it's been a very broad conversation. I think we've covered a huge amount in the space of 50 odd minutes. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and I'll provide links down below to the infographic, product growth newsletter, and everything else that people find useful from this discussion. But yeah, any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to leave the listeners with to take away from this, and yeah, tell people where they can find you as well.
Yeah, most of you are probably most skeptical about becoming an indie builder, that part of it. There are alternative approaches. This is the approach that has worked the best for top AI companies. If you're thinking about, I don't know, your Series A seed stage AI company, you can probably break in without that. The alternative approach is if you're an existing PM or you're a student, do AI work. So if you're a student, go get a degree in AI. If you're a PM, build AI features and then do the normal job search process. But if you really want to break into those top companies, I think the building at this point is a requirement.
Excellent. Akash, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.